breaking into a bank safe. I still remember the cold metal in my hands. I'm 47 now, old enough to feel the weight of my choices in my knees and my conscience. This happened years ago, back when I still told myself I was just cutting corners in life, not carving out something rotten inside me. I'm posting this here because I've been doing a lot of late-night thinking lately, and some stories don't stay buried just because you want them to. At the time, I wasn't a career criminal, at least not in the way movies portray it. I was a guy with a decent brain, a bad streak of pride, and a life that had quietly slid off the rails. Divorce finalized, savings gutted by legal fees, and a business that failed slowly and publicly. You know the kind of failure where everyone says, "I'm sorry, man," but you can see relief in their eyes that it's not them. The bank wasn't some faceless megacorporation in my head. It was the local branch I'd walked into for years. The tellers knew my name once. That detail matters, because it's how I justified everything. I told myself they'd insured the money, that no one would really be hurt, that I was just reclaiming something the world owed me. Classic lies, polished smooth by repetition. The idea didn't come to me in a dramatic flash. It crept in during insomnia and quiet afternoons, when desperation has too much room to stretch. I had time on my hands and a mind that wouldn't shut up. I'd catch myself staring at metal doors, locks, hinges, noticing things I shouldn't have been noticing. That should have scared me. Instead, it felt like focus. What really pushed me over the edge was a phone call. A debt I couldn't kick down the road anymore. The kind of call where the person on the other end is calm, professional, and absolutely certain you're running out of options. When I hung up, I didn't punch a wall or pour a drink. I sat there and thought, very clearly, I can fix this. That's the part that still unsettles me, how calm it all felt at the beginning. No ski masks or alarms blaring in my imagination. Just a problem and a solution. I didn't think of myself as someone who breaks into banks. I thought of myself as someone doing one terrible, necessary thing. I didn't know yet how heavy that choice would become, or how long I'd be carrying it. I just knew that once the idea took hold, it didn't let go. And somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and the rationalizations, there was something else too, a quiet, electric thrill I was ashamed to recognize. That was the night the line moved. Not crossed yet. Just shifted enough that I could step over it later. After that phone call, the idea didn't explode into my head, it settled. That was the dangerous part. It felt calm, reasonable, almost polite. I'd be making coffee or driving nowhere in particular, and suddenly I'd be thinking about the bank again. Not the money yet. The place. The routines. The predictability. I kept going there like nothing had changed. Same small talk with the tellers, same nod to the security guard who looked bored enough to forget faces. I started noticing patterns without meaning to. What time things slowed down. How the building sounded when it was quiet. I told myself it was curiosity, nothing more. But curiosity has teeth if you feed it. I didn't share the thought with anyone. Not because I was protecting them, because I was protecting it. Saying it out loud would have made it real, and once something's real, it can be judged. As long as it stayed in my head, I could dress it up however I wanted. Survival. Necessity. Temporary madness. What disturbed me most wasn't fear or guilt. It was how quickly my mind adapted. I wasn't imagining alarms or police. I was imagining relief. Breathing room. A clean reset. I even caught myself feeling insulted when I thought about how easy it might be, like the world had underestimated me for years. That's when I should have stopped. When the thought stopped scaring me and started feeling familiar. Instead, I let it sit beside me, like a quiet companion, waiting for me to acknowledge it wasn't going anywhere. Once the idea felt permanent, planning followed naturally. Not dramatically, no corkboards or blueprints, just small, practical steps. I started reading. Old forums, outdated manuals, anything that talked about locks and safes in a technical, boring way. The kind of boring that feels safe. I told myself knowledge wasn't commitment. Knowing how something works doesn't mean you'll touch it, right? But every detail I learned made the thing feel more solid, more achievable. I paid attention to closing times, cleaning schedules, how often the night guard changed. All things I could have noticed before. I just hadn't needed to. The scariest part was how methodical I became. No rush. No panic. Just a checklist quietly forming in my head. And once you start making lists, it's hard to pretend you're still innocent. I was careful not to turn it into a science project. That was my rule. The moment it became technical, it would feel too real, too deliberate. So I focused on logistics instead of mechanics. Timing. My own behavior. How to look like I belonged where I was standing. I rehearsed myself more than the act. How I'd walk, how I'd breathe, how I'd react if something went slightly wrong. I practiced staying calm in everyday situations, like it was a muscle I needed to build. Long lines. Awkward conversations. Silence. You'd be surprised how useful boredom training is. I also prepared excuses, not alibis, just explanations. Why I'd be out late. Why I'd be tired the next day. I wasn't planning for success as much as I was planning to blend back into my own life afterward. That felt important, like I was building a bridge back to normal. Looking back, that was the lie I leaned on hardest, that this would be a detour, not a new road. The night itself didn't feel special. That bothered me. No thunder, no dramatic pause where I questioned everything. I ate a late dinner, washed a plate, stared at the sink longer than necessary. Ordinary life has a way of mocking you when you're about to do something irreversible. I remember checking the time over and over, not because I was impatient, but because I wanted to anchor myself to something normal. Schedules are comforting. They make bad decisions feel organized. I told myself I could still back out right up until the last second, and technically that was true. What tipped me forward wasn't desperation, it was momentum. I'd thought about it for so long that not doing it suddenly felt like a waste. Like I'd already paid some invisible price and deserved a return. That's a dangerous way to think, by the way. It turns hesitation into cowardice. As I stepped out into the night, the air felt sharper than usual. I remember thinking, very clearly, after tonight, I won't be the same person. I didn't know whether that scared me or excited me more. Getting there was the longest part. Every red light felt personal, like the city was trying to slow me down. I parked farther away than necessary and walked the rest, hands in my pockets, shoulders loose, practicing being just another nobody out late for no reason. The building looked smaller at night. Less official. That surprised me. In daylight it had authority. In the dark it was just concrete and glass pretending to be important. I remember touching the door and feeling that first jolt, the cold metal grounding me in the reality that this wasn't a thought experiment anymore. Inside, everything sounded louder than it should have. My own breathing, my shoes, even the silence had weight. I moved slowly, not because I was careful, but because I didn't trust my legs yet. They felt like they belonged to someone else. That was the moment I knew there was no clean way back. Whatever happened next, the version of me who walked in was already gone. The safe wasn't heroic. That's the first thing people get wrong. It didn't gleam or loom or feel cinematic. It was just there, heavy and indifferent, like it had outlived better men than me and would outlive worse. When my hands touched it, the cold went straight through my skin and into my chest. Time did something strange in that room. Seconds stretched, then collapsed. I remember thinking about stupid things, an old song, a crack in the wall, how my fingers were shaking even though my mind felt sharp. I had to pause just to steady myself, to remind my body that panic wasn't helpful. Nothing went exactly how I imagined. Small delays. Tiny noises that felt enormous. Each one made my heart jump into my throat. I kept waiting for someone to shout, for lights to flip on, for reality to catch up with me. But it didn't. It just watched. When the safe finally gave way, there was no rush of triumph. Just a hollow click and a wave of disbelief. I remember thinking, that's it? Like I'd crossed a line I'd built up for months, only to find it thinner than expected. That realization scared me more than any alarm could have. The moment it opened, something changed in the room, not physically, but inside me. The adrenaline spiked late, like my body finally realized what my hands had already done. My mouth went dry. I kept swallowing, like that might calm my heartbeat. I didn't take everything. That surprises people when I tell them. I don't know if it was restraint or fear or some leftover illusion of morality, but I made choices in there. Each one felt heavier than the last. I kept thinking about fingerprints, cameras, invisible threads tightening around me. Then I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. Footsteps. Distant, but real. My brain went blank in that special way where panic strips you down to instinct. Every plan I'd rehearsed dissolved, replaced by one thought: don't exist. I stood there, barely breathing, realizing how fragile my control actually was, how close I was to becoming a story someone else would tell about a man who almost got away. I froze in a way I didn't know my body could. Not crouch, not hiding, just still. Like if I became quiet enough, reality might overlook me. The footsteps stopped somewhere beyond the room, close enough that my ears rang with it. I remember counting my breaths and immediately losing count. My thoughts turned stupid and repetitive. This is it. This is where it ends. I pictured my name in a headline, my face dragged out of old photos that didn't know this version of me yet. Then the sound shifted. Keys. A door farther away. Someone muttered something I couldn't make out. Normal human sounds, irritatingly casual. When they moved off again, I felt this rush of relief so strong it almost knocked me over. That was the first time guilt hit me hard. Not because of the money, but because I'd just hoped another human being would walk away so I could finish what I was doing. That realization stayed with me long after the room went quiet again. After that scare, I rushed, and that was a mistake. Not a big one, just enough to remind me I wasn't in control anymore. My hands felt clumsy, like they belonged to someone else, and every movement sounded amplified by my own nerves. I kept expecting something to stop me, a door that wouldn't open, a voice behind me, my own legs giving out. Nothing did. That was almost worse. The building let me leave the same way it let me in, indifferent and quiet, like it hadn't noticed me at all. Outside, the night air hit my face and I realized I'd been holding tension in every muscle. I didn't run. I walked. Running would have felt like admitting what I'd done. I wanted to look normal, even though I felt like I was glowing with guilt. By the time I reached my car, my heart was still racing, but my mind had gone strangely flat. No victory. No relief. Just the heavy awareness that I was carrying something invisible that hadn't been mine an hour earlier. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. Every passing car made me tense, every reflection in the mirror looked like suspicion. I kept checking my speed, terrified of getting pulled over for something stupid and small after something so big. Once I was inside my apartment, the silence turned hostile. The money, or what I'd taken, didn't feel real. It sat there like evidence, not relief. I washed my hands twice, then again, as if cold water could rinse off intent. I barely slept. Every noise outside sounded like consequences finally catching up. That was when it hit me. The crime wasn't over just because I'd left the building. I was going to have to live with it, minute by minute, and there was no exit plan for that. The days after were worse than the night itself. I kept expecting a knock on the door, a phone call, some official tone that would turn my stomach inside out. Every siren felt personal. I jumped at emails. I answered unknown numbers like an idiot. I tried to act normal. Went to the store. Made small talk. Laughed at things that weren't funny. Inside, I was running simulations nonstop, what I'd say, how I'd explain myself, whether honesty would sound better than silence. I even practiced looking surprised in the mirror. That part still makes me cringe. Nothing happened. No knock. No questions. Just time passing, slow and deliberate, like it was daring me to relax. I didn't. I couldn't. Getting away with it didn't feel like freedom, it felt like being sentenced to wait indefinitely. Weeks went by, and the fear didn't fade, it just changed shape. It stopped being sharp and became dull, constant. Like a low-grade ache you forget about until you move the wrong way. I paid off what I needed to pay off, exactly like I'd promised myself I would. No celebrations. No sense of victory. Just transactions. What surprised me was how it bled into everything else. Conversations felt staged. Compliments felt undeserved. Even good moments carried this aftertaste, like I'd cheated my way into them. I started avoiding people from the bank's neighborhood entirely, afraid I'd recognize someone who might recognize me. The money solved the problem that caused the crime, but it created a different one. I no longer trusted my own moral boundaries. Once you cross a line and the world doesn't end, you start wondering how many other lines are just suggestions. That thought scared me more than getting caught ever did. I didn't turn into some hardened criminal afterward. If anything, I tightened up. I followed rules obsessively, like they were a fragile truce between me and the version of myself I didn't fully trust anymore. I paid bills early. I avoided risks. I stayed small. But the damage wasn't loud, it was internal. I'd learned something uncomfortable and irreversible, that under the right pressure, I would cross a line I once believed was solid. That knowledge sat with me in quiet moments, especially when I was tired or angry. It didn't push me to act again. It just watched. I pulled away from people, not because I was afraid they'd find out, but because I didn't know how to explain the distance between who I appeared to be and who I now knew I was capable of becoming. Carrying that split version of myself was exhausting. Still is sometimes. I wasn't caught. That's the truth. And I don't say that with pride, I say it because people assume getting away with it is the good ending. It's not. It just means the consequences show up slower and quieter, and they stick around longer. What I learned is this: desperation lies to you. It tells you a single act can reset everything, that you'll step back over the line afterward and be fine. You won't. Even if no one else knows, you will. And you'll carry that knowledge into every decision that follows. If you're standing where I once stood, telling yourself you're different, smarter, justified, stop. Ask who you'll be forced to live with afterward. Not in court. Not in public. Alone, at night, when things are quiet. I'm 47 now. I live an ordinary life. But there's a version of me frozen in that room, hands on cold metal, realizing too late that some problems don't end when you solve them, they just change shape.